Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. If this is your first time stopping by, thanks for clicking the video. Now let's get into it. Kingdom Come Deliverance is a game I've played for probably 40 hours before making this video. I've never beat the game, and since I started making YouTube videos, I've thought about making a video on the game, pretty much as an excuse to play it all the way through. But now I'm going to be taking a deep dive into the game and its story, so let's get started. Well, starting off, I wanted a bit of a challenge to make the game more difficult, and possibly more of an immersive experience, so I chose to play it on hardcore mode. Hardcore mode makes you take 2 negative perks to start off with, and I chose the easiest ones to deal with, at least in my opinion, being tapeworms, which causes you to need to eat more food more often, and brittle bones, which makes falling hurt more. Hardcore mode also consists of these things. There are no autosaves, and the only way to save the game is by drinking an item called Savior's Schnapps, or sleeping in your own bed. Your character also doesn't show a position on the in-game map, so traveling requires a bit of map reading. You also don't get letters on your compass, and you can't fast travel either. It also doesn't show me a health bar or a stamina bar, and there are no indicators in combat. Oh, and you make a lot less money for the things you sell. I'm sure there's more, but we'll figure it out later. Now, starting off, I wanted to say this intro is really beautiful. I actually forgot how good the game looks, and here we have some weird ass slap. Okay. We start out with our character, Henry, being awoken from a drunken sleep by his mother. She tells me to go and talk to my father, so what I do is instantly start raiding the house for everything it has, mostly trying to stock up on food, and then I headed out the door to talk to my father. He gives me this long list of errands to complete for him in town, and lets me in on the fact that he's working on a sword for a man named Sir Radzig. He wants me to grab a crossguard for the sword and get some charcoal, but he wants me to get the money for the charcoal from a guy named Kunesh, who owes him quite a bit of money, and lastly, he wants me to pick up some ale from the tavern. Anyway, off we go. First thing I did when coming into town was talk to a sword fighter, who asked me if I wanted to learn how to sword fight, so I jumped at the chance and followed him. He didn't really teach me anything I didn't know, but I'll take the experience I can gain from it. After that, I managed to run into my friends in town at the tavern, and they came up with this brilliant idea of throwing at a guy's house. Yeah, not sure why, but it sounds fun. Anyway, I proceeded to throw some and then, that's funny. And some people related to him happened upon us in the act, and we got into a little spat where we threw some hands. Me and the boys won, of course. And after kicking butt, we had to run from the town guards. I used this to my advantage because my friends happened to stop over by Kunesh's house at the end of the run, and I remembered from my first time playing that this guy really doesn't want to give me the money back, and he will fight me. And our boy Henry here starts off as if he were a baby who's never lived in the real world, so he has no experience. He's pretty pathetic. He's so pathetic, in fact, I managed to get my ass kicked before I could even lure him over to my friends. I ended up trying again, and this time it actually worked. We all jumped the guy and beat him unconscious. So remember, kids, if you can't beat him, just jump him. After knocking the guy out, I stripped him of all of his worldly possessions and stole absolutely everything I could from his house. And now it's time to visit my mommy because my God, did I get the hell beat out of me the first time. Now it's time to get this little tutorial over with, so I sold the stuff I stole, and I bought some charcoal. Then I went to go get some ale and the crossguard and headed back. After taking it all back to my father, I got a really nice cinematic cutscene here. Now, these cutscenes can break up the gameplay, but I honestly really enjoy the storytelling, so it's okay. And then this girl shows up. She'll be relevant later on, but here's a cutscene of her butt. Henry will end up doing some pretty crazy things to her later on, but now it's not the time, because here, everything ends up going to a huge attack ends up happening where everyone around me dies, and Henry's forced to watch his parents get murdered. I don't even end up making it into the castle fast enough, and I had to run for my life. The mission's literally called Run for Your Life, I think, where I end up stealing a horse so that I can warn the neighboring town. I'm chased by all these weird dudes and got shot in the leg with an arrow, but I managed to survive miraculously. After riding away from these guys for what felt like forever, I ended up making it to the town called Tomberg, where they pulled the arrow from my leg and patched me up, only to tell me there's nothing they can do for the town of Skalitz. I'm just told to get some food in my stomach and get some rest to heal up. I guess Henry here is lucky enough just to have survived the attack. I then get awoken in the middle of the night by some lady in my room who wants to talk to me about the attack on Skalitz. Kind of rude, honestly. I fall back asleep just to be awoken again. But it turns out this time Sir Radzig and his people ended up making it out of the castle alive. They actually snuck out at nightfall and were riding over towards Rete. Here Henry insists he needs to go back to Skalitz to bury his parents, but he's told that that's a really stupid idea. And Sir Radzig really wants me to stay in Tomberg until this all passes over. Great, now I have to sneak out of Tomberg because it's almost like I'm a prisoner now. Sure, it would be smart to stay in town, but the story won't let me. I'm forced to take watch on the wall for the rest of the night, and by morning, the army that attacked and razed Skalitz shows up. They actually came looking for Sir Radzig, but we tell them that he's not here. Now after all that, I'm given control of my character again, with the objective being to get back to Skalitz and bury my parents. I spoke to a few people to figure out how I would sneak out, which led me to the conclusion that the easiest way out was to steal some guards' armor and just walk through the gates in disguise. Upon sneaking out, I actually forgot to steal a horse, like a dip. and had to walk a long way towards Skalitz, but luckily there's a cutscene that transported me most of the way there. Boy oh boy did they really mess this place up too, and the pouring rain really doesn't make it look any better. I actually ran into some bandits on my way, and the combat is just as fun as I remember it being. Sure, it's a little hard, especially in hardcore mode, but I think it'll keep getting better when I learn new combos, and the difficulty should make it engaging for longer, even later into the game. I made my way over to my parents' bodies and got a rather sad cutscene. Jesus, that was hard to watch. It's actually a really sad cutscene. Anyway, after that tearjerker, I found a shovel to dig my parents' graves, and while looking for it, I actually ran into this who was going to smack this dog with it. After running him off, we get a cute cutscene where I actually gained a new friend. And boom. Just as I was about to grab my parents, some dickheads run up on me, and just before I could grab them, I got completely decimated. This man hit me twice and I fell down. How the f did I just get destroyed by this man in 2 hits? Good news is I didn't die though. The Teresa girl from earlier ran in with an entire cavalry from Tomberg, and ended up taking me over to her uncle's mill by Rete. So I did survive, however I lost the sword for Sir Radzig, and I guess my revenge arc starts now. Also, turns out I owe Teresa's uncle, Pashek, quite a bit of money for sleeping in his house for 2 weeks and getting healed. But here we go, I can finally travel around wherever I want, and the tutorial seems to be finished. I made my way over to Rete, and looked around for Sir Radzig so I could let him know that I lost his sword, like a total bum. Even though I lost his sword, he wants to take my sad ass into his ranks and sends me off to train with some guy named Captain Bernard. While training with Captain Bernard, some snarky dork named Sir Hans Capon challenges me to an archery match. We actually tied, but he acts like he won, so yeah, whatever. Then because he won, he has the balls to challenge me to a sword fight, where I absolutely destroyed him, like the freaking swashbuckler I am. Now that I managed to show off my prowess to you in battle, let's forget that part where I got demolished by that dude Runt in 2 hits earlier. Anyway, after that, I was sent to the bailiff to join the town's guard. I spent a little time patrolling and being shown the village of Rete, until it was time to close up. I went to ring the bell to notify everyone to shut down their shops, and after reaching a tavern, Sir Hans Capon was still there, partying, rowdy, and drunk. Words ended up being exchanged, and then fists, and after that we were busted for fighting by the technical lord of this town, Sir Hanush, who told Sir Hans Capon he now has to take me on a hunt with him as punishment. Great, I guess I have to spend more time with the cocky whom I've beat at everything, but still treats me like a peasant. Sounds like fun. By the end of the night, I went to an inn outside of town and got myself a room. First thing the next morning, I went to meet up with Sir Hans Capon for our little hunting trip. Oh, and guess what? He gets to ride a horse all the way there, and I have to walk beside him. This just keeps getting worse. After a really long journey, we made it over to a campsite, where we talked for a little while and got to know each other. Still a dick, to be fair. The next morning, Sir Hans Capon decides to challenge me to a competition on who can get more hairs, and I got myself a sweet 100 groschen for beating him. Again. Suck it, nerd. Afterwards, he comes up with this brilliant idea that totally won't go ass up, and insists we go on a boar hunt. The dork ends up shooting a boar with a bow and arrow, and it runs off. He gives chase, leaving me in the dust, and it's time for me to track them down. Without a map. Fun times. It only took me like 30 minutes to actually find where they were, and after all that searching, I see him off in the distance tied up by a group of cumans. I chose to pass time until the darkness of night so I can have some cover. I didn't want to run into a group of heavily armed men all alone. That probably wouldn't have gone well for me. So instead, I opted to sneak in and assassinate all of them in their sleep. Like a real man, you know? I slowly made my way over to him and cut him down, and in the cutscene we traveled back to Rete. After making it back, I'm sent to talk to Sir Hanush and Sir Radzig, where they thank me for saving the but while talking to me, somebody came in with news of the neighboring village being raided. Henry then asks to be a part of the investigation, and they actually allowed it. Sir Hanush tells them to give me a horse. Looks like I'll be riding in style from now on. But before leaving to Neuhof, I went to get my armor repaired and bought myself a new longsword. I have to make sure I'm putting money into armor and weapons. Hardcore is actually pretty hardcore. I then got on my new horse. His name's Pebbles, and yes, he's a good boy. And we rode down to Neuhof. Before reaching Neuhof, I could see billowing smoke in the distance and continued on towards it. And upon reaching the horse ranch there, everything around me was slaughtered. Humans, horses, all cut down like they were inconsequential. Captain Bernard was there and he told me to ask around about what happened. I proceeded to question everybody before finding blood leading off the farm into the woods. After following the trail for a while, I heard men talking and I jumped out on them. There were 2 of them, one was injured on the ground and the other wasn't really happy to see me, so I had to fight for my life. After a little sword battle with one of the bandits, I got a few words out of the injured one before he died, but I found a bloody hoof pick on his body, and I went back to Neuhof to figure out who it belonged to. I talked to a man there named Mark, who told me it belonged to the suspicious kid I talked to earlier, Ginger. I went back to where he was to look for him and question him, but it turns out the little ran away. I guess now I know who my suspect is. The story from here on out is a lot of investigating, like I'm a detective trying to solve a series of mysteries, but this one was pretty annoying. In order to find Ginger, I had to talk to some charcoal burners, and the first ones I talked to told me to check a different area. So I rode down there, and they also told me it was a different group of charcoal burners. This is really fun, going charcoal burner to charcoal burner until I find the rat. The third group then told me that they would tell me where Ginger was if I took care of a couple bandits who rode in also looking for Ginger. I proceeded to go into the woods and beat up on the two bandits, which was surprisingly difficult. Henry's still a bit of a noodle arm right now, but after taking out the bandits, the charcoal burners finally told me where Ginger was hiding, and I tracked him down. He actually told me everything. Turns out, he wasn't involved in any of it. He was just afraid and ran away. He then tells me the hoof pick was actually taken by a man with a limp from Ujits. I think that's how you say it. So I reported back to Neuhoff and talked to Sir Radzig, who congratulated me for my work and told me to head out to Ujits so I could track down this limping fellow. Probably shouldn't be hard, I could probably run faster than he can. If my fight with those bandits told me anything, it's that I really need to train before I continue on this path trying to solve crime. So I stopped off in Ratai and got a bit of training from Captain Bernard before leaving. I also talked to the bailiff who told me there's a scribe in Ujits that can teach me how to read. So when I say Henry's absolutely useless early in the game, the man can't even read. I guess that's common with peasants back then, but I proceeded to ride my horse down to Ujits, and I got myself learned up on the art of reading, and it was time to find the old limpy boy. While riding through town, I noticed a group of villagers gathered around this house, so I headed over to see what was going on. Turns out our man with the limp was named Lubosh, Limpy Lubosh, and he was actually murdered. I guess the bandits got to him before I could. Now I really need answers. I asked the villagers around, and they told me that the village priest might know a thing or two, and this is where the fun begins. The priest. This man is actually something else. He tells me he can't tell me anything about Limpy Lubosh, but he does have an idea. He told me I should meet him for some drinks down at the tavern tonight, so I headed over there. I proceed to drink and party with the priest and a couple of ladies all night, and I get some crazy drunken cutscenes, including things I can't show in this video. Our boy Henry got lucky, let's say. We actually tore the town up, drinking, fighting, bell ringing, and even sexy times. I even woke up in a field with sheep with the priest bleating. Very fun. After waking up all hungover, the priest tells me he needs to do a sermon, but he can't do it himself because he's way too hungover. He asks me to do it for him. I don't understand why, but he tells me he'll spill the beans about Limpy Lubosh if I agree to help him, so let's do it. The sermon went surprisingly well, so if my whole detective line of work doesn't work out, I guess Henry could be a damn good priest. The priest finally ends up telling me what he knows, and it turns out Limpy Lubosh and his gang didn't want to murder the people of Neuhoff. They just joined up with some crazy bandits and got mixed into some pretty bad stuff. He then gave me a few names, including Riki from Ledechko, but before that, I'm having a lot of fun in this game up to this point. The writing is really fun, the cutscenes are a blast. I didn't think I'd enjoy being with a degenerate priest as much as I did, but it was really funny. From here on, I chose to do a few side missions, including the mission for Pashak, who wanted me to steal a ring for him to pay back the debt I owe him. Only the ring is on a dead man who's been buried. I got the ring in a roundabout way, and Pashak actually taught me how to pickpocket and pick locks, which is another great thing about this game. There are so many side skills, it's actually a really deep system that I enjoy. I feel like I could play the character Henry in so many different ways, and probably will, to be honest. I was getting pretty curious about the story at this point, because in the 40 hours I'd played previously, I hadn't really made it past this point in the story, but I had done several of the side quests. Feeling curious, I headed over to Ledechko to find this Riki fellow. Before I looked for him, I stopped off to see some bath maids. They ended up making a real man out of me, and I got a pretty sweet mustache. Now, for finding the man they call Riki. This took forever. I had to search 3 different caves, and on the very last one I searched, I found him. Don't you love it when the last place you check is the right one? I think on my way over to him, I killed 8 different bandits just to get to him, only for him to tell me to speak to someone named Timmy. I may have been a little bit mad at this, and I decided to kill him, but I guess it did put him out of his misery, so the wild goose chase I'm going on doesn't seem like it's going to end anytime soon, but nonetheless, I rode off to find Timmy. I then spoke to a girl who said she was Timmy's sister, but then 4 well-equipped guys walked up on me. Not cool. As it turns out, we were both looking for Timmy, and there's no way for me to lie my way out of this one, so instead I had a plan. Plan went a little like this. I told the guys where Timmy was, but first I needed some cash for the information. So I got 150 groschen, and then I let them run over to Miohead. But after they ran off a little bit, I killed the guys who stayed back to watch me, and then I ran after them to take them out one by one. After doing that, I tracked down Timmy in the end. He told me the bandits I'm looking for are camping in some weird Timmy from South Park way. Like, the guy's not the smartest, but it's time to report back to Sir Radzig. Sir Radzig wanted me to sneak into that bandit camp to get a better idea of what we're dealing with before we attack them. Before doing all that, though, I had a mission to steal some Waffenfrocks for the miller. I did that for him in Tomberg, but I did kill a guy, and the miller really didn't like that. He actually called me stupid, or something along those lines. Then I bought some new gear and tried to court that Teresa girl who saved me, but she told me to come back in a few days. So off to the bandit camp. This actually took me quite a while. I'm not the sneakiest guy, but I did in the end actually manage to sneak in, and I got the bare minimum done to report back to Sir Radzig. Now it's time for the really big attack. This is a really cool mission. It's a big battle where you go in with this army to fight the bandits, and eventually fight the main guy who beat you up and stole your sword. But I had some major glitches and some crashes here. I never figured out what was causing them, but I did end up continuing to get several of these crashes on the big missions during loading screens. In the end, I did persevere. After 17 times of running through this mission and crashing on the loading screen before Runt, I finally beat his ass. Altogether, this mission is a good mission if you don't have to play it 17 times, especially for how easy it was to actually beat Runt at the end. There wasn't much of a big payoff for me. Now, after all that work of tracking down these bandits for tens of hours and replaying that mission 17 times, I didn't get a single answer. At the very least, I don't have to play the mission ever again, so thank God. I went back to Rete to the castle and was given my own room, but I'm still met with the same fate of having to track down more people. My next mission is to go to Miohead and interrogate a man that they have captive after an ambush on the village. I was also informed of the fact that a group is making counterfeit Groschen and was given the order to track that down too. But before doing that, I decided to enter into the Rete tourney, and I actually won the thing. It took a really long time, but the fighting in this game is genuinely a fun experience, so I didn't mind. Fighting the men in the tournament is really challenging, and I'm forced to play defensively, but trying to land combos and perfect blocks is pretty engaging. I was awarded in the end with a nice pair of gloves and 400 groschen. From this point on, I detoured even more, and I did more side activities and missions, trying to make more money. I really need new equipment. None of the side missions I did were that interesting, except for a mission of courting Teresa. Let's just say this mission wasn't safe for work. Teresa and I played a game and did the dirty in a barn, which I won't be able to show on YouTube, but I guess it was cool. In the end, Henry's a real ladies' man. I mean, to take a woman into a barn and elope for the first time is a bit wild. Good on him, though. Now that Henry's been with his first woman, sober anyways, I continued on with some side missions. But first, there's this guy named Black Peter who wasn't really happy I ended up kicking his ass in the tournament, and he tried to kill me. He really wasn't around either. The guy poisoned his blade, which caused me to die. I had to try again. This time I actually kicked his ass so badly he didn't even land a hit on me, which is ultimately necessary if you don't want to be poisoned. Then I proceeded to sell his gear and headed out. I went out to kill some more bandits, and I also did a mission to find the 3 nightingale birds. That all went really smooth, and I'm actually starting to stack up on a serious amount of money. With my newfound riches, I bought myself the Herod's longsword, which is one of the best longswords in the game, and then I went off to check out a DLC mission for Sir Radzig. He wanted me to meet up with a group of men and ride with them, I suppose to keep an eye on them. While riding out, we found a burnt down settlement, and learned this has to do with a guy called Hagen Zowl or some I don't know, man. I'm just in this for the cash, honestly. Finally, I arrived to Miohead to talk to the captive, until I learned everyone in town is sick and I have to help them before I can speak to him. Awesome. More work. I'm really starting to feel like an errand boy now. I proceeded to go to Sao Sao to find help. There I also found my friends from the beginning in Skalitz. They seemed to be having a rough time and asked me if I could help them find work. Before we do though, it's time to bring a cure back to Miohead. I spent a long time going between Sao Sao and Miohead trying to give them a cure. After finally figuring out what ailed them and getting them the cure, I waited to see if it worked out, and after a short while, people seemed to be getting better, so I was finally allowed to speak to the captive. There, while speaking to him, a man named Straw, who said they killed his son, wanted to get revenge, which I didn't want to allow because I thought maybe I could get more information from him, so I ended up beating Straw's ass and let the man face real justice instead of some form of vigilante justice. After beating up Straw and arresting the man, I went to inform Sir Radzig what I learned, where I ultimately went for a detour again, and I chose to go to Skalitz, where the Kunesh guy from the beginning told me there was a treasure hidden somewhere. Sadly, I didn't find any enemies there, but it was weird seeing Skalitz be so destroyed, and visiting Henry's parents' grave. They most certainly got the atmosphere of a village once so full of life, destroyed completely. In the end, the treasure was nothing special, but I'm glad I went back. Leaving Skalitz to my next mission, I was to go to a meeting spot of the counterfeiters nearby. Upon arriving, I noticed blood and 2 bodies there. It seems like they were attacked, so I investigated the area, which led me over to some charcoal burners. All the charcoal burners in this game really know how to get themselves wrapped up into all kinds of Following along the trail, I found a building where the mercenary was being held in, and he told me a knight had came and attacked their wagon, where all of a sudden a cutscene started, and the knight came back to grab the money from the wagon and ran off. I gave chase, but I was ultimately too slow to catch him. I was then given a mission to go to Sao Sao and wait in the tavern for him to arrive, so I could confront him and figure out what's going on. In Sao Sao, I staked out the cavern for a couple days until I finally saw him. After confronting the guy, he told me that this is not where he wants to talk about it, and told me to meet him by a little pond. So this part was pretty interesting. I met him under the tree by the pond, where he pretty much told me to f*** off and tried to fight me, and my god was this old bastard tough. After a while, I actually won, and we got to talk. Turns out he thought I was involved with the bandits. Maybe he should have asked me before swinging his sword at me. In the end, his name was Ulrich, and he was actually a pretty cool character. Turns out me and him were both trying to figure out the same thing. He couldn't tell me much about the mission that he was on, just that he was trying to figure out where the counterfeit money was coming from. But he did give me a letter to go and take back to Rattay. I returned to Rattay and delivered the letter to Master Freyr. He mentioned a mission in Cao Cao, so the writing back and forth is really starting to begin here. Before continuing on with the main story, I decided to go back with Kuno and his men for the Sir Radzig DLC. We all rode up by Ujits, and stumbled upon a village being raided again, and I chose to help save it. In the end, I gathered a ton of loot from the bandits and sold it all, and got back on the hunt for the counterfeiters. This part is all rather long-winded, so let me try to condense this. I talked to Ulrich again in Cao Cao, and he mentioned a painter who would know about the quicksilver used to make the counterfeit money. The painter led me to the monastery, and the monastery led me to the drop-off point for the quicksilver. The drop-off point didn't tell me much. I just killed a couple of the bandits and took their stuff. Later on, I figured out who was making copper sheets for the counterfeiters. Then I did a silly mission for the blacksmith who was doing it. He wanted me to prove his son makes some really nice armor. By getting into a fight with it, I got a free cuirass at least. I then ran into a guy named Florian whose girlfriend had been kidnapped. But here's the interesting part. While trying to track her down, I somehow managed to stumble across a mine. With all these bandits outside guarding the mine, I was a bit curious. So I delved deeper inside after fighting them, and I somehow managed to stumble on accident right into the counterfeiters. I don't know how lucky this was, but it was pretty cool. The fact that I can finish all these missions in such different ways is a really awesome part about this game, and my enjoyment for the game just got even higher. After arresting the man responsible for the counterfeiting, I went back to Rattay, where I had to talk to him so he could give me more information on who the actual leader of this operation was. And here continues my constant writing back and forth between Cao Cao and Rattay. In Cao Cao, I needed to get in with this weird bandit group, and they wanted me to kill a man named Pius, who sold his soul to the church in order to get away from them, and I need to find my way in there somehow. I managed to become a monk for a short time and even figured out who Pius was, but then a glitch happened and I was somehow thrown out, and I had a fine. So instead of going through this mission by becoming a monk, I chose to reload from an earlier save and take a much darker route. I did this by sneaking into the monastery and choking out some man to steal his key to get into the monastery at night, where I proceeded to sneak into and stabbed Pius in his sleep, much faster and easier. Upon proving to the bandits that I killed Pius, they sent me to their camp. I've officially made it into their ranks as a spy. I went into their camp and everything was going really well until I got busted by a familiar face who spotted me, which led to me being taken as a prisoner. And, oh yeah, turns out Sir Radzig is my actual father. Okay. Well, guys, let's try to steal my stuff back and escape this shithole. I managed to sneak around for a while, and I actually got my gear back. Then I just ran right in front of them all, straight out of there. At this point in the story, Henry is officially calling Sir Radzig father, which is pretty strange. But hey, I'm no longer a peasant anymore. I'm freaking nobility. Let's go. Out of the way, peasants. It seems after a really long, boring point in the story, things are finally going to start getting good because Sir Radzig decided we needed to march against the bandits' camp. So let's go. This battle mission was actually pretty fun. I got a couple crashes as per usual, but not as bad as the other. We made our way through the camp and killed a bunch of the bandits just to find out the leaders weren't there anymore and that they're marching towards Tomberg. I'm not sure why Tomberg, that place is kind of ass, but okay. Then Lady Dum Dum decides to let them in, which forced us to push through Tomberg, where they managed to take her and Sir Radzig as hostages. I have no clue what Sir Radzig was doing in order to get caught. Seems rather convenient, but sure, man. We proceeded to do a sneaky mission to try to get them back, which seemed impossible to complete. Then I had to help build a trebuchet to siege Tomberg. The reason I'm cutting all this short is because it was a very long and boring path in order to get this trebuchet up. I just wanted to cut the dudes' throats who took over Tomberg. During the building of the trebuchet, some army decided to attack us, and we actually got a pretty fun fight trying to defend the trebuchet. I then got a boring break in the story and had to sleep for 2 days just to get to the main battle, the Siege of Tomberg. This part was actually pretty cool. I got to shoot the trebuchet, and then we all went in. Again, I really like this mission. Anytime you have to go into a big battle and fight a bunch of people, I have a lot of fun. I do admit the combat is getting pretty easy at this point, but damn it if it isn't so much more interesting than something like Skyrim. After pushing our way through Tomberg, we ended up agreeing to a deal with the main villain, where he released Lady Dum Dum, but took Sir Radzig to release him after reaching Skalitz to ensure his own safety. And here we are, the last scene of the game. Sir Hans Capon and I rode off to Skalitz to go find Sir Radzig, and after finding him, I got a nice happy cutscene of me and Sir Radzig writing and talking about all sorts of stuff that we just went through, and father and son stuff. I have to say I'm genuinely happy with the way the game ended, but one question, where the f is my sword? All the stuff I just went through to get that sword, and it's just leading into another game? I have to beat another game in order to get the sword? All in all, I gotta say I'm really excited for Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. That wasn't actually the final cutscene. There's an epilogue at the end, which just drops a bunch of juicy info on how the next game will commence. I had a freaking blast joining in on this world as Henry, and my god was it immersive. And almost in every way, the voice acting, the world building, and the characters were all so well done. I think the game stands on its own for being not only a great RPG, but also for its really nice story. In the end, it's an incomplete story, and I'm excited to see where it goes. I did partially end up regretting playing on hardcore mode, mostly how it came down to me having to ride my horse everywhere, and being forced to replay missions when the game crashed, but I probably wouldn't have played it any other way, because for at least 3/4 of the game I was so immersed in the experience, and in my opinion, a great degree of that was because of hardcore mode. There are a lot of DLCs and side missions I didn't actually talk about, and some of the things I didn't even end up playing, I just don't have the time. I already spent over 90 hours playing this game for the video, and I really needed to get it out. So after about 140 hours in Kingdom Come Deliverance, I think I'd enjoy hopping in again just to try out some new fun and silly ways to play. The systems in the game are all really deep, and so are the perks that you unlock along the way. But anyway, I had a really fantastic time playing this game. It's honestly a 10 by me, by a mile, 10 out of 10. Thank you guys for watching, I hope you enjoyed the video. I didn't have any more time to just sit here and pour into this game, so I hope it's deep enough. If you enjoyed my journey, drop me a like on the video to help it out. I worked really hard on this, so a sub to the channel would be awesome. Anyway, I'm gonna get out of here. See you later.